We had a lovely exercise where we can just let everything in our body go, preparing us to let go of everything now in this meditation. Whatever happened right before we came, see if we can just set that aside for now and allow that sense of ease, that sense of okayness to flow through the body right now. And if you haven't already done so, feel free to very gently allow the eyelids to close so that they're barely touching each other. With that soft and gentleness, without any force or strain whatsoever. And we allow the whole body to just settle in. Bringing our awareness to the here and now without any rush whatsoever. Because the process of settling in with the body and the mind takes time. So we don't hurry. We just allow that body and mind to just settle on its own through this sense of ease that we invite through the whole body, through the whole experience. And we can do that by inviting that ease to flow from the top of the head all the way down to the tips of the toes. And as you go through, we can allow every part to release, to loosen and lighten. Perhaps the jaw. Allow that ease to flow through the shoulders and the entire upper body. And then let that light and loose feeling flow down through your lower body, all the way out to the tips of the toes. And feel free to adjust your position once you feel that perhaps there's more strain or tension. And we can ease back into it again. And when the body is more at ease, we can allow our mind to now be more at ease. And this can mean different things for each of us. Perhaps to invite in that sense of ease, we could imagine ourselves in our most favorite place, most peaceful place, Maybe it's in the fullness of the nature, or maybe it's the same feeling like you've been on vacation and there's no worries and cares whatsoever. Or maybe you're sitting all alone in a vast open space with no one and nothing to bother you. Whatever that might be, allow that same feeling to flow through the experience, if that feels comfortable. And at this time, we just have this present moment by letting go of the past, of things that have already happened, by letting go of the future, of things that haven't happened yet. And we allow the awareness to rest in the quiet and stillness of this very moment. And when the mind, the body feel more at ease, allow our attention to softly to the center of the body in the middle of the abdomen, or any point within that feels most noticeable for you. Perhaps at the tip of the nostrils or in the chest, using the breath. Choose one point of awareness within the body and allow the mind to softly rest there, as soft as a feather that comes to land on the calm surface of the water without any ripple whatsoever. Allow this point to be your home base, where you can just be at ease and just be, without having to do anything else at all. And if at any point you notice that the mind is no longer there at that point, we can consider that to be a beautiful moment of mindfulness, of awareness that the mind is no longer there. And with that point of awareness, we can simply let go of anything that took us away. And with a kind and caring attention, we softly guide our awareness back without judgment, without emotion, just a soft tenderness to rest again at the point of awareness, at the center of the body, or wherever is most noticeable and you feel most at ease. And we simply rest our awareness, softly observing, fully aware of anything that might come up, but in a neutral way, without pushing anything that we don't like, without holding on to anything that we might like, with no resistance, just letting it be. As we maintain awareness of that point within, softly and continuously. And if it's helpful to help you maintain your awareness at that point within, if you find that the mind is wandering more often than usual, perhaps it might be helpful to visualize a bright object slowly appearing at your point of awareness. And you can softly observe that bright object. Or perhaps you could repeat some familiar words, a mantra, and allowing the sound of those words to float softly from the center or any point within. Perhaps, I am peaceful, I am calm. Or the mantra, Samma Arahang. Whatever words that bring in that sense of ease from your point of awareness. Or perhaps it might just be more at ease to sit without observing the bright object or repeat the sounds. Softly aware of your point without doing anything else whatsoever. Continue to rest your awareness within the body, coming back to it again and again in a soft and gentle way as we continue to meditate in silence. Continue to maintain your soft awareness at your home base, easy and natural. Allow the brightness, feelings of calm, peacefulness, and kindness to flow from within and expand outward to reach every part of your body, sharing that kindness and goodwill to every cell, along with the good wishes that may I be happy, peaceful, healthy and strong, safe, free from all danger, and have ease and well-being in my life. Then allow this kindness, peaceful, soft, gentle feeling to expand further outward, to reach everyone in your area, sharing with everyone this same sense of goodwill and ease. May they be happy, peaceful, healthy and strong, safe, free from all danger, and have ease and well-being in their lives. And then allow this sense of goodwill, kindness to expand in all directions ever outward, to reach all beings around the world with no exceptions. May all beings be happy, peaceful, healthy and strong, safe, free from all danger, and have ease and well-being in their lives. And whenever you're ready, you may softly and slowly open your eyes, continuing to maintain that awareness deep within throughout the rest of the day. Welcome back, everyone. So, after we had that meditation, the mind is now calm and ready for a talk. And today's talk is something that's near and dear to my heart. It's about how do we move from individual to social transformation, and looking at Buddha's approach to changing the world. And I thought it would be an interesting exercise to think about this idea of peace. You know, I know a lot of people, that's what's on a lot of people's minds nowadays, and for many, many millennia, right? How do we make positive change in the world, considering we're individuals? And, how do we move about making our conditions better for ourselves and for others? So I thought it'd be interesting to think about what it really means for the world to be at peace. And what does it mean for us to have world peace? And so with this, for the definition of world peace, the first definition is that outer state of tranquility or quiet where there's nothing, there's no civil disturbance on the outside. And yet Merriam-Webster provides a second definition, which is freedom from disquieting or oppressive thought or emotions. And now this is thinking about it from a different dimension, and perhaps something that we're more familiar with, those who meditate, those who are familiar with contemplative practices. And then a third definition of harmony in personal relations. And so we see from these definitions that there's two dimensions of peace, that we have the external dimension that we're more familiar with, but then also this internal dimension of peace. And how are these two connected? And so with this, we can maybe do a little bit of a thought experiment and think, well, let's say there's no war. We don't have any external conflict. Are we at peace? You know, what if in this absence of war or conflict, we ourselves, we're not really feeling it? You know, we're not quite at peace within, we're not feeling completely at ease with the whole world or within. If that's the case, would we say that the world is at peace? We might not be at war on the outside, but what if we're waging a war inside? And with this, I would say that no, the world, by definition, by the fact that we live in a system, this would not be considered peace in the world, because every individual makes up a part of this world and have in the world. And so we can see here that if we want there to be peace in the world, that peace also has to lie within us and start with us, because it's from this individual level where one can act and do anything. I mean, we can try to influence and try to control others, force someone else to do something for us, but we know in our own personal experience that that's not necessarily effective and won't work in the long term. And so a common response to this individual focus is, well, aren't you being selfish by turning inward, and only focusing on our own good? In his teachings, the Buddha had something to say about this. And he pointed out that there were 4 different kinds of people practicing in the world. And he says, and this is in the Anguttara Nikaya, monks. There are these four kinds of persons found existing in the world. What for? One who's practicing neither for his own welfare nor the welfare of others. Two, one who's practicing for the welfare of others, but not for his own welfare. Three, one who's practicing for his own welfare, but not the welfare of others. And four, one who's practicing for both his own welfare and the welfare of others. There are these four kinds of persons existing in the world. Now, what's interesting is that, he says of these four, he praises, extols the one practicing for the welfare of both, number four, as the foremost, the best, the preeminent, the supreme, and the finest of these four persons. So that's the first, the number one, we'll say. Now, what do y'all think is number two? We can pretty much rule out number one. We can guess that the person practicing not for their own welfare or anybody's welfare probably wouldn't come next. But who would be better? Would it be the person practicing, selflessly putting others first, practicing for others' welfare and not for their own, number two? Or is it number three, the person practicing for their own welfare, but not thinking about someone else? So here we actually see that the Buddha considered the person practicing for their own welfare and not for others' welfare to be, second best. Wow, kind of an interesting twist, right? We see that, why is it that when we're practicing for our own welfare and not thinking about others, that's better than someone who puts others before themselves? Now, to answer this question, we first need to look at what the Buddha considers to be the three root causes of suffering: this sense of unsatisfactoriness in our lives and in the world. And we can see that, these three root causes of suffering are mental states of greed, ill will, and delusion. By greed, we mean that sense of clinging, that holding on, that attachment to something that produces the sense of never having enough, right? And it ranges all the way to selfishness and avarice. And then we have ill will or hatred, this pushing away of what we don't like, unpleasant feelings, unpleasant situations, this aversion. And it might range from irritation all the way up to anger, hatred, envy. And then we have delusion, which is not seeing things as they really are, having presumptions that are not based on truth and maybe false views. And we can see that, beyond the individual level, this expands outward, in that these three root causes of suffering, of greed, ill will, and delusion, can be seen in our society today, institutionalized in various forms. With greed, we see that institutionalized through our current economic system, where corporations are never profitable enough and people never consume enough. So it becomes the objective to increase profits at whatever means possible. And so that means that people have to be conditioned into buying and consuming and thinking that this is, the purpose of our lives. We see this in, systemic poverty, right? In the system, people um, without their basic needs met is not part of the conversation. And also environmental destruction. In terms of institutionalized ill will, we see this very clearly in militarism, this war economy, this spending billions and billions of dollars and effort in weapons and things that cause harm. We also see this in systemic racism and our current system of mass incarceration. For delusion, we see this institutionalized in our corporate media, right? We see that there's so much that's pervasive in our lives. TV, computers, phones, radio, print, that's telling us how to live, how to think, how to be, what we should do or not do. They're trying to sell us stuff, commercials, advertising, propaganda that collectively attract our attention. So once we see and understand what Buddha considers to be the root causes of suffering, let's go back now to what the Buddha meant by practicing for one's own welfare and the welfare of others. So he says that practicing for one's own welfare means ridding the mind, one's own mind, of greed, ill will, and delusion, while practicing for the welfare of others means encouraging others to remove their greed, ill will, and delusion. And he explains that, the person who neglects their own welfare is one who makes no effort to overcome these three poisons, and so will continue to act affected by these three poisons and engage in actions that ultimately bring harm to others, despite their good intentions to help. So it actually becomes, a very important practice to practice for one's own welfare so that we don't cause harm to others, knowingly or unknowingly. And with this, we practice for our own welfare, and if we decide to practice for the welfare of both, we can see that in practicing for that welfare of others, we encourage them to remove that greed, ill will, and delusion. So if we decide to tackle on these two practices, we'll find that we work at an individual level and work with others towards the broader goal of a peaceful world by addressing these three root causes of suffering. Now, in today's society, we often focus most of our attention on external factors affecting the world and, thinking about the welfare of others without necessarily working on these factors within ourselves. And so what we might find is that we become less effective in addressing these root causes in the world. And so we need to understand the importance of practicing effectively for our own welfare and for others. And so the question might be, well, okay, how do I do that, right? First, to really understand this, we need to understand the various levels at play and understand at the very basic level, unit of action is the individual, because all systems are made out of individuals. But at the same time, we as individuals live in and are conditioned by the various systems that we ourselves have created or our ancestors. So we see here that personal practice is essential, absolutely. And at the same time, there are also powerful systems of delusion that produce suffering and continue to limit what we are able to do. So institutions need to be addressed as well. working on our individual selves is hard enough, and in and of itself, a worthy lifelong goal. But if we have that desire to take on the challenge of approaching problems on a macro level, perhaps using a systems thinking approach can help us see that bigger picture and view systems in a more holistic manner. And by systems thinking, I'm talking about the process of understanding how things influence each other within a whole. So as you can see in this image, there are many different systems existing and working at the same time. Some in cooperation, others in opposition, but they're all just doing its own thing. Right? We have our own internal biological systems. Then we have externally the social systems around us. And then the human civilization systems. Then the planetary solar systems and ecosystems. All of these things are just existing and doing its thing. So with my training and background in public health, I found that the ecological model is a very useful way of understanding systems thinking and looking at the different levels within a system. So here you'll see the individual at the center with other overlapping levels expanding outward. Next is interpersonal, organizational, community, and then the broader public policy, so society level. And in each system, each level has its own set of institutionalized processes and ways of functioning. And these are things that we've all agreed to, either consciously or by our tacit acceptance, by the very fact that we go along with it. And so we'll see that each of these layers has its own set of values and functions based on its own causes and conditions. And in this ecological model, we see that each level has a life of its own. And at the same time, what happens in one level has effects on other levels. So basically what I'm trying to explain here is that there is a great amount of complexity, right? And add to it individuals who each have a mind of their own, and add it all together with all these different systems, it's mind-boggling. So what's required of us when we think about making change on an individual and social level is to understand that complexity at all the various levels. And to really understand this, we take it back to the individual level. Many of us have deep-rooted care and a wish to help loved ones, people we know or don't know, help them alleviate their suffering. But, with this intention, we have to recognize a few things. That each of us as human beings at any given point in our lives have our own delusions about the world, understandings or misunderstandings. We have our own attachments and aversions, the things that we like and don't like. We have our own resentments, that deep anger, things that we hold on to and can't quite forgive just yet. We have our traumas, and we have our different levels of patience and personal development. At the same time, we have varying resources and different skill levels in addressing life problems. So this is to say that when we understand the conditions in which any human being faces at any moment, we begin to understand the complexity of all these different systems that we find ourselves in and the world around us. And this requires deep emotional wisdom. It requires enormous personal skill to reach others in an effective way that can open their hearts to change. So with this, we need to really know how to work well with others and find that emotional wisdom in our thoughts, speech, and actions. And thankfully, Venerable Barin and the team these past few weeks have shed light on this emotional wisdom through the 4 bases of empathy, through that giving, endearing speech, helpfulness, and consistent tactfulness. What are some practical steps? We can think of it very broadly in terms of 3 things: doing good, avoiding bad, and purifying the mind. What does that mean more specifically? It means giving, ethical self-discipline or conduct, and meditation. And these 3 practices are actually considered to be the antidotes to those root causes of suffering that we just talked about earlier. Giving as an antidote to greed because we let go without expecting anything in return. Ethical self-discipline as the act of nonviolence, of avoiding harm to oneself and others. And this is an antidote to ill will and develops loving kindness. And then thirdly, meditation, which we did today, which is an antidote to delusion, because we're developing concentration and mindfulness that cultivates wisdom to clearly understand ourselves, others, and the conditions that we find ourselves in. And so just very quickly, how do we start? We can start by understanding ourselves better through meditation, self-reflection, and analysis. And we can ask ourselves these questions on the screen. First, thinking about what are my values? And then what are my strengths and weaknesses? What inspires me? What change do I wish to see in the world and dedicate my time to? And how have I personally cultivated peace and joy? And then more practically, once I've figured all those other things out, what is actually within my area of influence? Where do I have the agency for change to be most effective? So with this, this can be the topic of many, many, many books. But the key takeaways that I'd love for us to understand with this is that we practice for ourselves and for the welfare of others, making sure that we take care of that both. And then we need to address root causes of suffering at all the various levels. And when we're being strategic, we look at what is within our reach at this point of time. And so looking at that greed, ill will, and delusion as the broad forces underlying the actions of various individual actors, and not necessarily wasting our time looking at the individual perpetrator, or, and losing so much energy and with that. And then lastly, learning how to work well with others. But to really do that, a good way to understand others is to understand ourselves first. So this is a lot and requires understanding of the complexity of all the different things happening. But the good thing is that world peace that we so dearly wish, for humanity, can start from within us. And so as we work to embody this peace and nonviolence ourselves in our thoughts, words, and actions, we're already directly changing the world and bringing about peace. Then if we decide to apply this wisdom to helping others, we will bring about positive social change that will transform the world in lasting and very profound ways.